And then you have the shingleback, which is a reasonably closely related thing, but it looks like, I don't know how to describe
like
it.
A walking pine cone.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a great description.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. This is one of your co-hosts, Billy Brown. Here's another episode that is coming from the backlog of recorded material from the summer into the fall. This is an interview, conversation really, with Stephan Fricker and Robin Irizarry, talking about a bioblitz that happened this fall, kind of a counterpart to the City Nature Challenge that takes place in the spring, or I should say the Northern Hemisphere spring. So that having a bioblitz that takes place 6 months or so later gives the folks in the Southern Hemisphere a great way to take part in a big international competitive bioblitz when things are really picking up for them down there. We hope you like this episode and all of our episodes. And if you do, please feel obligated to tell everyone you know about how much you love the podcast. Please leave us great ratings and comments on your podcast listening app of choice. And please check out all of our wonderful sibling podcasts on the Wildlife Observer Network. Because again, the Urban Wildlife Podcast is now part of the Wildlife Observer Network family of podcasts. And last, of course, please don't hesitate to be in touch. You can email us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at urbwildlifecast. And of course, you can find us on Facebook. Don't be a stranger. Feel free to get in touch with your ideas and thoughts on the podcast.
My name is Robin Irizarry. I am, I'm from the Philadelphia area. Grew up in Philadelphia here. Involved locally in a lot of the urban nature and wildlife enthusiasm that happens around the region. For my professional work, I work for the Alliance for Watershed Education, where I manage their summer fellowship program. But I'm been involved with the Urban Wildlife Network, Urban Wildlife Podcast, and the Wildlife Observer Network for a while now.
Great. And Stephan, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm Stephan Fricker. I'm from Adelaide, South Australia, which is right down the bottom of the world. And I'm
or the top, depending how you orient the planet.
We turn it up the other way.
The globe's on the other side. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to. I'm outnumbered here, so I don't want to. All right. So I'm involved in a bit of citizen science work at the local university here. I was involved in developing something called Mozzie monitors, where we use urban mosquito traps and citizen science to monitor mosquitoes in an urban setting. And I also do a bit of engagement work with older Australians, getting them involved in citizen science through iNaturalist, and looking at the health benefits of that, to do with all sorts of health benefits. And I'm sort of a project officer on that, working with some people at the university. So I've also been involved in a few bioblitz type things in South Australia and Australia.
Wonderful. You actually have me reaching for a pen and paper so I can make a note to email you later about that health benefits thing.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll start off with, I guess, a quick introduction to what the City Nature Challenge is as the backdrop for this. Those of you who have listened to this podcast might remember in the past us having episodes about the City Nature Challenge. This is something that I like to call it an international urban competitive bioblitz that was started by two museums out in California, the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, where they, I think 2016, had a bet about who could get more people using iNaturalist in a given period of time and logging more observations and more species. Then it snowballed from there. And so Philadelphia, where we live, took part for the first time in 2019. Last year we did it again, although it was kind of a fun, last year. This feels like last year. It was still this part of 2020, which is the longest year we've ever experienced. And in the beginning, we thought we'd have another bioblitz of everybody getting out in groups and having lots of great led, curated walks and stuff. Nope, it turned out we did sort of pandemic style, very decentralized, and still a great experience. And so, one of the challenges we've all, on both ends of this call, have had with the format of the City Nature Challenge is the timing. And this isn't anyone's fault. We're not blaming the Californians for doing it this way. But it's a little bit at the end of April. It is not the most biodiverse time of year for our city, being a little bit northern in latitudes. And Stephen, why don't you tell us why that's not so great if you're on the other side of the planet?
Yeah, well, for Australia in particular, I think it's getting quite cold. But also the City Nature Challenge has tended to be on that last weekend in April, which I don't know how to explain this to you guys, but there's something called Anzac Day, which is a holiday. It's a long weekend. And Anzac is a term we use for the Australian and New Zealand Armed Forces. So it's a throwback to World War II. So it's a bit like, I don't know if you have anything similar, like a military type thing. And everyone goes out and goes camping, and they have a bit of a march. And it's to remember, I suppose, the people that served in World War I and World War II.
It's like Memorial Day we have for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And because it hits over that weekend, there's a lot of people, they tend to go out camping, so they're not necessarily in a city. They tend to go out fishing, and there's also an early morning parade. So they're not thinking about doing something different. Everyone's got this. There's a lot of tradition around it, cricket matches and whatever else. So it's not a particularly good time, and not really the best time to do a biodiversity challenge, because it's heading into the cold weather. There's few insects around, and not many things are flowering. So it's a bit of a challenge for us. And then with COVID as well. That was also a challenge. It was the first year that we did the City Nature Challenge in Australia this year. Again, it seems like last year, but down here as well. So it was a particularly challenging effort to get it up and running.
So I'll just point you in a slightly different direction for the conversation. You might not know this about me, but I'm kind of a reptile and amphibian guy. And people often think of Australia. People like up here, we joke about, it's a land where everything can kill you. And you have a lot of diversity of dangerously venomous snakes. But if you're into reptiles, what I know about also is that you have an incredible diversity of lizards, of just an obscene number of skinks and geckos and stuff.
Absolutely.
And just I don't know, what kind of stuff do you find in Adelaide?
Not many in April. It's a bit too. But in my backyard, I've got eastern blue tongues.
Yeah.
I have like a little marbled gecko as well, southern marbled gecko. And that's just in my backyard, but we don't see them that often because I have a few cats from next door, unfortunately. And in cats are problematic. They tend to eat a lot of small reptiles and things like that, so we don't really like them too much here. Well, some of us don't. But often we get things called shinglebacks, which are a large skink as well, in the same family as the same genus as blue tongues. There's Tilica rugosa and Tilica skincoides. You can look that up later. So that's generally the sort of things we see down in Adelaide in an urban setting. There are a bunch of other little skinks as well. There's a three-toed skink, and there's a couple of water skinks that hang around, and I often see some of the smaller skinks in my yard when I'm moving rocks around. Sometimes they're underneath the rock. Yeah. But late April is not a particularly good time for skinks. You can, if you do lift up a few rocks, you do often see a few sort of hiding and just chilling out, but they are a lot less active, and you also run the risk of running into a redback spider or a huntsman or a snake. So it's not always the best.
I don't know, man. I'd be looking under those rocks. I as a kid who grew up reading books about fascinating lizards and snakes and stuff from around the world, the idea that you have blue-tongued skinks just on a routine basis in your backyard. It's just absolutely delightful.
Yeah, I have a little population.
Yeah. In case you don't know what these are, I don't know, like about a foot long, maybe a little less than a foot long, but heavy-bodied, chunky lizards with huge jaws. I think they mainly eat snails and stuff like that.
Yeah, a bit of vegetation, snails and other invertebrates. And then you have the shingleback, which is a reasonably closely related thing, but it looks like, I don't know how to describe
like
it.
Like a walking pine cone.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a great description. And then when you walk up to them, they will open their mouth and stick their tongue out and gape at you and hiss. I had a PhD student in our lab from the US, and she was fascinated by them the first time we came in the field. She wouldn't I was out doing some field work, and she wouldn't leave it. She just wanted to take photographs and watch it. I'm like, we got to go, man. I've got so much got to do. Let's get out of here.
That would totally be me. Yeah,
a shingleback. It's okay.
These are the fellas that have the tail looks almost identical to the head.
Yeah, and they're interesting. They're actually an interesting species. Yeah, they do have a stubby tail. Yeah, and they also mate for life as well. So they got some really interesting behavioural aspects around them as well. When you're out driving in the countryside, you'll see two of them walking along the side of the road, and one in the front will be the female, and the one behind will be the male that will be trailing the female. So it's quite often you'll see them trailing, and they tend to mate for life as well, monogamous. Well, we all know that monogamy doesn't necessarily mean monogamy, but yeah. They're interesting species. They're quite a delight to see by the road.
Awesome.
They do get hit a lot by cars.
Yeah. I had to ask you about that, but now I got to stop because I could talk about that for now. So what did you guys? So now let's talk about the Southern Bioblitz. So then, what happened next in organizing when you guys were looking at this?
Well, I guess with you guys, you'd know that it was a bit of a challenging year this year with COVID. And we were entering, I suppose in South Australia, we were quite lucky. We weren't hit that hard by COVID. We managed to avoid a lot of the shutdowns. But Victoria and New South Wales, they got hit pretty hard. And it was looking fairly shaky for us as well. And this was the first year that there were 4 areas that got involved in the City Nature Challenge. So early on, we saw that there was going to be a bit of it might be a bit difficult for us and it was going to be all new to us. So I got in contact with the other organisers and we started working fairly closely together. And we decided to ditch in Australia the whole competitive aspect and try and work more towards more of a cooperative approach and promote the idea of a backyard bioblitz because we were very uncertain as to what was going to happen. And we wanted to try and promote this whole idea of the City Nature Challenge within Australia because we think it's a great idea to get people involved in looking at biodiversity and looking at nature and appreciating it a bit more. So early on in the piece, I suppose in March, we started thinking about the whole idea of this fairly cool weather bioblitz and how that was going to be a bit of a challenge for us. That's what we've been talking about, actually identifying these things like lizards and things like that. So we threw it out, one of us threw it out there that we will try and do something in spring. So that's where the whole idea came from, this sort of networking that we did. And then I suppose a few weeks after the City Nature Challenge, being the 4 that I am, I rang up the other guys and said, let's do it. And they were all very keen. So it started off being just Australia. But I didn't think that was, I thought we should open up to other people as well. So I knew a few people around the world, but in the end, we decided that we were going to make it only Southern Hemisphere. And unfortunately, I did contact Philadelphia early on, and I've got some contacts up in the Northern Hemisphere. But the other organisers decided that they really wanted to keep it in the Southern Hemisphere, which I think has actually worked out quite well.
Good.
Because we've approached it is a bit more of a cooperative approach, a bit less of a focus on a competition and more of a focus on engaging people, and also not necessarily a focus on urban biodiversity, more of a local government area biodiversity to try and involve people in more rural settings, which we did get a lot of feedback in Australia about people who wanted to get involved in the City Nature Challenge, but they felt that they were out in the, what we call the boondocks, out in the out in the rural setting, out in the bush, and they really wanted to try and highlight what they had to offer as far as biodiversity and get their communities involved. So I suppose that's where it all started from. And we just got in contact with a few people in South America and Africa, and we ended up with 12 countries and quite a few different areas. We're lucky enough to have a PhD student in our lab from Brazil. So we have we had a way to overcome the language barrier with Spanish and Portuguese. Unfortunately, in Australia, we speak English and we don't really learn a second language that widely. So none of us spoke Portuguese or Spanish. So we're very fortunate we had this connection where we could use this as a growth opportunity for Larissa, our PhD student, in the true sense of the word. She really embraced it. So we got a really good, strong showing in South America, and we had some really good partners over there. We made some good contacts, and we were very blown. Well, I personally, and I think all of the organisers in Australia, were completely blown away by the enthusiasm in the South Americans. They do things a little bit differently. It's a bit of a culture shock, but it's quite a pleasant culture shock. They have a different way of doing things that I just couldn't understand. But you know, it's very it fits the way we do things. I guess it's a bit. I don't know, a bit more collaborative than what we're probably used to. Australians are sort of fairly laid back and they go, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that sounds good. And then we'll go along with that. But over there, it's a lot more collaborative. They work very well together. And they were very enthusiastic. We had a few undergrads do some really good films and some good promotional material, which we were just amazed by. I don't know if you guys have seen any of that, but it was astounding.
So we hadn't. I'm going to look that up. What did the results look like? And I don't mean gross numbers, but what cities ended up turning out a lot of people, let's say, that you might not have expected before this?
Yeah, I think Peru did really well. They had a lot of casual observations, which is something we want to work on. But they also had a lot of interesting observations with young people getting involved, like some fairly young individuals making some pretty interesting observations, and including things like a rare blue-headed parrot, as well as a couple of pot plants. So it was a bit of a mixed bag. So they did do some interesting observations down there. Africa, of course, they Cape Town, as you know, they get very enthusiastic. Which was
if you're just listening to the stuff about the City Nature Challenge for the first time, Cape Town, they're kind of like it's like having an informal swimming contest and like Michael Phelps shows up.
Pretty much, yeah. They didn't put much effort in this year, and they got they joined last minute and they got 16,000 observations as compared to the second person, which got like
casual roll into the area.
Sorry.
Just rolling into the event very casually and just dropping a cool 16,000 observations.
Yeah. So they're very enthusiastic. Most of their organisers were out of the country. So, yeah, I think a lot of our guys, to be honest, we've got a couple of fairly competitive people down here, and they were of a mindset of excluding of Cape Town or putting them in their own little competition. But we won't go into that. We don't want Tony to know about that. Some of the other places. We had a place in Colombia, and I know Colombia is mostly in the Northern Hemisphere, but we accepted them because they're partly in the Southern Hemisphere. And I didn't want to exclude. I've got a friend there, a PhD student, Jimmy, and I didn't really want to exclude her. She was pretty enthusiastic. So,
what city in Colombia?
Julia is a new city, first time they joined, and that was run by undergrad.
Okay.
And they got about 3,500 observations, and they hired a bus and they went around the hills and they did public engagement and they did some films and they had drone footage of these all these undergrads in streams, or that they had their biology lecturers involved. That, I think they were the standout as far as the message that we want to put out there, which is engagement and getting people involved. And they did a big film where they went out on this bus, and they had banners, and they went and talked to villagers and talked about biodiversity. It was fantastic. We were completely blown away by those guys.
That's great.
Yeah. And within a couple of days of joining, he did another film where he had the mayor of the town and all these public officials all on film supporting the Bioblitz. So it was the enthusiasm and the engagement there was astounding. I can't recommend those guys highly enough. Edwin from Julia was awesome.
All right. So yeah. I'll transition over to talking about Philadelphia. And so I'll say that we had learned about this Bioblitz, and we're always happy to jump on any Bioblitz we can. And so we were, and it didn't work out, obviously, because you defined it as the Southern Hemisphere, and that's fine. But we decided, hey, there's no reason we can't do our own little Bioblitz. And so, Robin, do you want to talk about our history with fall Bioblitzes and what we did this year?
Sure. So we actually, the year we found out about the City Nature Challenge here, we were a little late in the game, so we didn't get to get Philadelphia actively involved in the official City Nature Challenge the first year, maybe 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, 2018.
So we had decided to kind of do a dry run in the fall in the first place. So that was kind of our first attempt at a local Bioblitz, was in fall 2018, which went over really well. We had some organizations like our local Tacony Frankfurt Watershed Partnership helped to lead a Bioblitz in the park. That was one of the first places where we piloted a Bioblitz, really using iNaturalist as the platform. And that was kind of the primer for us to get involved in the official April City Nature Challenge the next year. Philadelphia had a great turnout, great showing. I think we did really well for a first-year participant back in 2019. 2020, of course, we had all the complications of COVID. But really, we were really thankful that the City Nature Challenge and these iNaturalist-based Bioblitzes really lend themselves extremely well to the social distancing, implications of a global pandemic. We had a lot of environmental centers kind of scrambling to figure out how to pivot their programs since they couldn't do things in person. And this became something that a lot of organizations were able to really kind of take on and leverage, so that you could encourage folks to explore their own backyards with their families without going out and having to do big group events. You could still encourage folks to participate in this really exciting activity. Again, just like you had mentioned, Stephen, for us, April is not quite prime season for us. We're watching the results come in April, and we're seeing South Texas just, annihilating everybody else on the board with their biodiversity in the States here. Because, of course, the spring migration has picked up, there well before it reaches us here. So we definitely had interest in returning to a fall Bioblitz and having that kind of engagement. We had a lot of people who participated these first 2 years who were just itching to do more. Big shout out to our local organizers, Sam and Naveen, who have been really pivotal in putting these on, and especially in this fall when Sam really stepped up in helping to put information and resources out to get people excited about it. I think the really neat thing that we were able to see as far as results go, while some numbers, in the spring, the past year, we were able to get up to about 850 observers this year in the fall. And this was a much more casual attempt. It wasn't as broadcast as we typically do the spring Bioblitz. We had about 700, so pretty close,
Nice.
Not too far off from our participants before. And we had about 8,000 observations in the fall here in the Philadelphia area, with about 1,700 species tallied. the neatest thing again for us is just seeing a lot of things in bloom. Our fall blooming species like our asters and our goldenrod really cranking this time of year. We see lots of great pollinators, butterflies, just things that you can't appreciate in our spring bioblitz when stuff is still waking up. In April, our wood warbler migration, late April, is just beginning. It doesn't really peak until early May here. And we have these beautiful, colorful wood warblers that everybody looks forward to in the spring. In the fall, they're a little more tricky to ID. They can lose a lot of that color and become, more muted tones, a little more drab, but really exciting to try and find again. And, I think we had a great turnout of warblers in the fall bioblitz. Some really great, fall species, some really great insect life that we just don't have that early on in the season. For us, the number one observed species was white snakeroot, which is kind of infamous here in the States. It's a native plant. It's a beautiful white blooming flower that's all over the place here. It's infamous for being the plant that killed Abraham Lincoln's mother, one of our presidents.
Okay.
So because of the association with cows eating that plant and the buildup of toxins in the milk, people used to get milk poisoning induced by this specific plant. And that's always when we're doing environmental education walks, people are like, what's this plant? We say, oh, that's the plant that killed Abe Lincoln's mother. That was our number one observed species. The second most observed species for us here, and this is a real local, invasive species challenge we're going through right now, is the spotted lanternfly. So that was our number.
So wait a second, Stephen, you've heard of spotted lanternflies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I one of my jobs, I do a few things, is working in biosecurity. I've been fascinated with spotted lanternfly over in the States. I'm a bit concerned because it doesn't seem to be as taken as much as seriously here. But I know all about spotted lanternfly.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few nasty images coming out of the States and Philadelphia, and in particular. Yeah,
we're essentially ground zero in the States here. The first ones were discovered in Berks County, just north of us. Yeah, and so we're in the real battleground here. And right now in the fall bioblitz, we're seeing them in their adult stage. We had them; they were again really high in the rankings in the springtime, and that was all their nymph stages where there are these small, spotted. Yeah. Honestly, they're really adorable looking bugs. Everybody's like, wow, they're so beautiful. But the implications on our local ecosystem is really rough. I know we've done former podcasts about this, so we won't go on.
Yeah, I'll say real quick that these are plant hoppers native to China, basically Southeast Asia, that spread into Korea around 2004, I think, and had a big impact on grape growing. And so they have an association with an invasive plant here called Ailanthus altissima, or the tree of heaven, which in its own right is a real pain in the ass tree. And so once the lanternflies got accidentally imported, they found plenty of their favorite host species to feed on, because Ailanthus is all over the place, tree of heaven. And something else they like to eat in particular is grapevines, or feed on are grapevines. And so they can almost wipe out a vineyard. And so that's what's gotten people excited in the agricultural pests arena, certainly in the States. It sounds like Australia too, where you have important wine or grape growing industries. They're really worried that the lanternflies will reach their fields. And so it's funny because they don't seem to be having a huge impact on other stuff. You can find a lot of them on maples and some other trees, but they don't seem to kill them or really hurt them too bad. What they hit are the grapevines. And so in Philadelphia, it's almost like a fever of killing lanternflies has seized the city. And so people get really into squashing them in all kinds of creative ways.
Yeah, I would hope for them to get into here because we have a lot of prime grape growing areas like wine country.
Yep.
Just north of the city, actually almost into the city. It's just not that far.
Do you have a lot of tree of heaven, a lot of the Ailanthus?
I don't think so.
It's a tough one for us here. It's one of these things that it can grow in any crack in the concrete. It grows on windowsills on old abandoned factories, and then you have a 20, 30-foot tree growing out of the roof of a building. It's very prolific here.
Robin, how do you kill it?
I mean, a lot of folks professionally, when they're going after this stuff, you can cut stumps. You might inject, right into you might paint the stump with an herbicide or do some kind of injection like that. It's a tough plant. It suckers really aggressively. So
yeah, I think we do have it here, but it's not that prolific because we're quite arid.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
we have a little bit of it here, but I think it needs to be a little bit more water around for it to take off.
I guess sorry, I pulled us off on a tangent there.
No, for sure.
Robin, you want to keep going?
Well, I was on the spotted lanternfly topic almost as an aside, but still related to this BioBlitz. I think the really neat thing about getting people excited about programs like this, City Nature Challenge, BioBlitz, is you introduce people to this really accessible platform for citizen science, community science. And I think the neat thing is there's applications where we're learning things from everyday observations that people are seeing. So take, for instance, the spotted lanternfly. We recently created a iNaturalist project specifically looking at predation of spotted lanternfly in the States by local and whether they're native or introduced species. Hey, are people photographing them eating, being eaten by anything? When these first hit the States, the word that came out was, and they're really not palatable to birds. Nobody really likes to eat them. Hence they have this really bright coloration, which you typically associate with stuff, not wanting to eat it. Lately, we've been seeing more and more photos coming out of our native birds adapting to this and just starting to warm up to them. So we have lots of photos of cuckoos and some of our larger flycatchers, some of our woodpeckers just eating spotted lanternflies. So we take it as a good sign. We have some natural predators as our allies. Spiders are pretty non-discretionary when they're eating stuff that flies into their web, it seems. Mantises, both our local native Carolina mantis and then some of the introduced species of mantis that we have seem to be really going after them. Again, it's a tough thing because their numbers are so, the spotted lanternfly are innumerable here. You just see whole trees covered on a, summer or fall evening, late in the day, late in the afternoon, you can just see the skies full of them. They're just drifting around. But it's good to know that we have any kind of natural allies helping us out. So when people are seeing this stuff and putting it into iNaturalist, it's really great and helpful. We know we have some researchers through Penn State who are working on specifically, documenting this stuff as well.
I'll just make an extra exclamation point on that it oftentimes we get the question, well, what is this data that you put into iNaturalist good for? In any citizen science effort, there are limitations to how you can use the data in the sense that it's often not collected in a sort of a rigorously unbiased way. But if you're looking for just examples of stuff that something exists, that this is a useful use of iNaturalist, where people are out there who are into this. They take a picture of a cuckoo or a mantis eating a lanternfly because they think it's really cool, and then that's data that researchers can pull from. And we actually have that exact situation happening where we got this researcher from Penn State University drawing on iNaturalist for data. Yeah.
Yeah, we recently had a paper published here looking at fire response. There was a project set up after the big fires. It was a couple of projects set up, but one sort of took off out of the University of New South Wales, and they've recently published, I think a couple of days ago, one of the guys who's actually on the organising committee for the Great Southern Bioblitz is an author. and they were looking at the data from that particular project and trying to look at how the ecosystems respond from the large fires we had down here, which were quite substantial. And the stats out of that, I haven't actually read the paper, but apparently the statistical analysis was quite interesting. Our friend Larissa had a quick look at that. So there are some pretty interesting ways to use this data, I think. Looking at invasive species and species distributions, changes in species distributions, it's pretty. You don't know what you're going to be able to use it for until it sort of dawns on you what you can actually use it for.
Awesome. I think we've got a couple minutes left in our time for this call. So we'll start with wrapping up. Robin, anything you wanted to wrap up with?
No, I think we're excited to have the opportunity to try this out in fall and really showcase the amazing stuff that we have moving through during our fall migration up here in the States, in Philadelphia in particular. I just encourage folks to, download the free iNaturalist app, create an account, and start snapping photos of the stuff around them. It may seem just like a casual, insignificant thing for you, but just like Billy mentioned, there's stuff being discovered all the time, through this really easy to use, accessible platform.
Absolutely.
And Stephen?
Yeah, I'll just back up what Robin was saying. There was a new spider species discovered in someone's backyard on just the other day on iNaturalist. So, even in your own backyard, there are people doing things like setting up little projects and for their own little piece of the world. And then there are umbrella projects for that, so you can compare what other people have got around the world in their own little backyards and see how things change over time. And it's a good way to sort of learn about what's going on in the world around you and learn different species, learn your birds and learn your insects. And you don't know how that could be useful going forward, particularly with phenology and looking at the timing of flower buds and the timing of emergence of insects. This is all important for our understanding of how biodiversity is changing over time. And I would also say, don't forget the common species, because everyone's trying to go for that rare thing that no one's ever seen. And during our recent Bioblitz, I got a first for a small grasshopper, which was fantastic. But one of our most commonly observed animals is the magpie, which it's important to know about the distribution of those animals as well, because they might not be here one day, and we need to know about how these things change. And without that baseline data, we can't make predictions going forward. So, don't forget the common species, I would say. And if you go out for a walk, take your camera with you and take a photograph. You don't have to take 100, you could take 5.
So, in case your kids are with you and they get really annoyed that you keep stopping, which, I think Robin and I both probably experienced. But get as many as you can before your kids want to kill you. All right. With that, I guess we'll wrap up the call. Thanks, Robin, and Stephen, thanks especially. It's been a lot of fun talking, and I always just get tickled that we're having these conversations on the other side of the world. It's a wonderful thing.
It's great, isn't it?
All right. See you guys.
Thanks. See ya.
Great speaking with you.